What's up and welcome to the video. This is going to be a fun one because we have whatever you want to call them. Apple's big guns, the heavy hitters, the iPhone 15 Pro line of smartphones. And I have been using the natural titanium 15 Pro Max as my daily phone for the last at least 2 to 3 weeks now. And much like everything else Apple has announced in the past month or so, this product falls into the refinement category more than it would the revolutionary category. But either way, it's been a lot of fun, so let's talk about it, the iPhone 15 Pro line. Okay, so let's just jump right into one of my favorite aspects of the 15 Pro, and that's how Apple has kind of tweaked the way that the phone is built. Now, if you watch the keynote or you see any of the commercials on TV, you'll know that the phone has a titanium enclosure. It's a small amount of titanium, like it's a thin layer around an aluminum frame. But the biggest difference with something like titanium is how much lighter it's going to make the phone feel. If I'm not mistaken, you take a phone like the 15 Pro and compare it to the 14 Pro that was made out of stainless steel on the enclosure, you're looking at a 20-gram difference in terms of weight. And as someone who used last year's 14 Pro Max all the way up until this phone came out, I did hold both phones in my hands at the same time, and you absolutely can tell a difference whenever you're holding a 15 Pro versus a 14 Pro. And I think overall, the phone looks really good. I touched on this a little bit in the iPhone 15 review as well, but Apple did a really good job of rounding off the edges whenever it comes to like the front display, the back glass and stuff like that, and they did a real nice job of blending that in with the enclosure. So whenever you're holding the phone in your hand, it doesn't feel as sharp as phones like the 12, 13, and 14 Pro did. Those were much flatter and much boxier. This one feels really smooth in the hand. And one other thing I wanted to touch on whenever it comes to the weight. With phones like the 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 being stainless steel, whenever you would hold those in your hands, you always kind of got this air of premium feel as you were holding them. Like, I'm definitely someone that associates a phone that has some nice weight to it with high quality, good build quality, things like that. But it's crazy that with this phone, the 15 Pro, Apple still did a really good job of giving you that premium feel in the hand. It is noticeably lighter, but I've never once felt like it's lacking in terms of quality. And I gotta say, I think the natural titanium was definitely the best way to go out of the 4 colors. One thing to note, if you wanted to buy a 15 Pro in a little bit of a darker color, like the black one or the dark blue one, they will catch fingerprints a lot more on the enclosure. I'm sure you've already seen it all over the internet. And another thing to keep in mind is the titanium enclosure, it can scratch, especially if you're like me and you're not rocking a case all the time. And on darker colors, you'll start to kind of see that aluminum shine through underneath if you hit a deep scratch on the enclosure. So just something to keep in mind if you're not going natural titanium or silver. And there is a new star of the show, the A17 Pro, and this chip is pretty cool for a couple of reasons. First off, it's Apple's first 3nm processor, which, it comes with the usuals. This chip is going to be faster, this chip is going to be more battery efficient, all the great stuff. And another thing I found interesting was normally whenever Apple introduces a new chip in a new iPhone, they'll spend some time during their keynote talking about how the performance in this chip is X amount better to whatever previous models they're comparing it to. But with this keynote, Apple actually spent a decent amount of time talking about how the iPhone 15 Pro can deliver a console-like gaming experience, even going so far as to show games like Assassin's Creed Mirage and Resident Evil Village running natively on an iPhone, which I thought was really interesting. Now here's the thing, from a performance perspective, the A17 Pro is fantastic, but then again, every pro-level processor or every processor that has been in a pro-level iPhone has been fantastic for, years now. And whenever it comes to things like gaming, I'm really not the best person to kind of ask about stuff like that. The heaviest I'll go on my iPhone is NBA 2K Mobile, but whenever I switch from 14 Pro Max to 15 Pro Max, there wasn't a vast difference there. Now, I have no doubt in my mind that a chip like the A17 Pro can handle things like gaming. My question is, how is Apple going to approach things like cooling? Because whenever we look at other smartphones on the market that are dedicated to just delivering a nice gaming experience, your Asus ROGs, your Red Magics and things like that, those phones come with dedicated cooling. And something tells me Apple did not implement dedicated cooling anywhere in the 15 Pro line. So whenever it comes to longevity of gaming, I think that's something to see down the line. And taking a couple steps back to talk about battery life. Battery life on my 14 Pro Max was awful. Battery life on my 15 Pro Max it's been better. I'm still not going to give it the battery crown. I think that still belongs to the iPhone 13 Pro Max in my opinion. But either way, A17 Pro is here, it's running the show, and it does a pretty good job. And you still have other great features like ProMotion as well. And you know, I gotta give Apple credit because they really did do a good job whenever it comes to reducing some of the bezels around the display. Like, it is actually noticeable. Whenever I was looking at my 14 Pro Max and my 15 Pro Max side by side, I could definitely tell a difference. So it's the classic, you know, you have more screen real estate in the same size phone. So that's great to see. And one other Pro exclusive feature is the mute or the ring silent switch is now gone. And it's been replaced with what is being called the action button. And it's pretty cool. You know, you can use this button to program certain actions within the phone. You can do something like launch your camera. You can do something like turn off your phone, enable a different type of focus if you wanted to. And you can even go a little bit further into Siri shortcuts, and you can map different Siri shortcuts into the action button, which is pretty great as well. And of course, you know, the headline change for this year is USB-C coming to the iPhones as well. And we touched a little bit on the fact that the iPhone 15 and the 15 Pro actually have different types of USB-C ports in terms of charging speeds and data transfer speeds. The 15 Pro got the better side of that equation, obviously, to the point where you can actually record footage and transfer that video directly from this iPhone to an external drive. And again, that's going to be exclusive to the Pro line. And of course, it wouldn't be a Pro level iPhone without a Pro grade camera system. And on paper, this camera system sounds really similar to last year's 14 Pro Max. You have a 48 megapixel wide angle, a 12 megapixel ultra wide angle, and you have a 12 megapixel periscope telephoto lens. And one thing to keep in mind this year, if you go for the 15 Pro Max, you do get 5 times optical zoom. So that is exclusive to the Pro Max model. And interestingly enough, Apple has been advertising the Pro Max's camera system as a professional camera system for both photography and video. Like for photography, you get preset focal lengths, and for video, you have the ability to shoot in log, which historically has always just been associated with pro-grade cameras. Now here's the thing, it's everything that you would come to expect from a flagship camera system from Apple. Photos look great, full of detail, and I've even noticed some refinements whenever it comes to things like the bokeh effect in portrait mode. And I mean, hats off to Apple. This is a fantastic camera system overall. So much so that we actually shot this take on an iPhone 15 Pro Max. And as far as pricing goes, interestingly enough, that has remained the same unless you were someone who purchased a 128 gigabyte iPhone 14 Pro Max. And it's only the Pro Max because that storage option does not exist for the 15 Pro Max. So if you wanted to jump from something like a 14 Pro Max to a 15 Pro Max, you will have to double your storage at least this year around, but something to keep in mind overall. And honestly, I think we're at a point now where, I mean, we've been there for some time in my opinion, but phones now are just really, really good. I mean, even phones that are 2 or 3 years old. Like whenever I think back to the 13 Pro Max, still a great phone, right? Not too much different year over year. And I think even Apple recognizes that as well because year over year, we're getting some of these iterative changes, or essentially the process is, what can we improve about this particular phone for the next year around to just make it much more well-rounded, as best a possible experience as we can possibly provide for the next year around. But I'm thinking to myself, if I was someone who bought a 14 Pro Max, and like obviously you're not doing this in your free time, if I was someone that bought a 14 Pro Max, I don't think it's worth the amount of money you'd probably have to spend to jump into a 15 Pro Max unless you can find a wickedly good trade-in deal. I would say maybe if you have something like an 11 or a 12, then that jump is going to be a little bit more worthwhile because you get a lot of new that's going to come to those phones after about a 2 to 3 year gap. But a 1 year gap, smartphones are so good that even if you had a 14 Pro Max, it's still fantastic. The titanium, I don't think is an option, or it shouldn't be the reason why you upgrade. I get it if you want to go the USB-C route, but outside of that, if USB-C is not a must, I don't think you should upgrade if you have a phone that's like a year or 2 old. But hey, do me a favor, if you enjoyed this review, consider hitting the like and subscribe button down below. Let me know what you think in the comment section. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace. Peace.